Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone in this brand new start to 2023, and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission, as always, is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature spanning a whole range of genres to book lovers all around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I am Darren Kazanko, science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and one of your hosts and co-founder of Australian Book Lovers, coming to you today from a gloriously sunny Ghana country in South Australia.
And I'm Veronica Strachan. Welcome to 2023, also known as V.E. Patton in the writing world, and I'm a fantasy, memoir and picture book writer. Voracious reader, your other co-founder and host, coming to you today from a slightly cooler Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in Victoria.
But I think you're also coming from the future too.
Oh, from the future? Well, I am half an hour ahead of you, this is true.
Well, because you said from 20,000.
Oh, did I say 20,000?
Wow, we'd be like in
all right, let's start that
ethereal,
one.
Universal cosmic spaceships by then.
So let me say that it's actually not 20,000. What about 2023? How about that?
Well, that is good, but it still sounds futuristic, and I don't feel like we're in the future some days. Some days I do, some days I don't. But nonetheless, I think we have all got our fingers, toes, and eyelashes crossed that 2023 is going to bring a whole lot of goodness, whole lot of great positive energy, and maybe a change of luck for everybody, and all across the globe. I literally have got my fingers and toes crossed because it's anyone's guess as to which way things are headed. But at least we know that. Look, we didn't really have a spring, but summer's kind of hit down here in the southern section of Australia, and it's switched on as just like I remember it back in the days where we get the heat waves. So quite a little happy camper here.
Yeah, very good. Well, we had a ferociously hot day yesterday, and my poor lettuces and my spinach in the gardens are very sad. So halfway through the day, which I know you probably shouldn't do, I had to give them a drink because I thought, they're not going to make it through the 36 degrees, but they did with a little extra water, and I had some today, and it was delicious. So there you go.
See, this is why you need to grow super hot chili peppers. They stand tall in that sun and go, give me all you got.
There you go.
So we are here for episode 74. So
Indeed,
which is huge huge steps towards the mythical 100, which I'm still slowly chipping away and preparing for the huge celebration. But would you like to know a little bit about the number 74 for this first episode of the new year?
Indeed, bring it on, because all of the people who've been downloading our work, so we've hit 5,500 downloads, which is pretty amazing for a little Australian book lovers. I think we're doing extremely well. So what about 74?
Well, apparently 74 is considered an intuitive relationship number. So it's also considered introspective, spiritual. It's a good companion and a pragmatic number. 74 is, in theory, also a reminder that you cannot build something strong on unstable foundations. So that means that there's that introspection part of 74 might be so that we can have a look and see if any of our foundations require rebuilding. I suspect there's a few features in my little side of the world that are probably on shaky foundations. Could definitely do with a little bit of extra cement, definitely.
Yeah. There you go.
What about, we've had some, outstanding bingo calls. We've also had some quite bland ones.
Yes.
Tell me 74 is going to be awesome.
So 74 is hit the floor. And it's kind of good for a first up for the year. So hit the ground running. 74, hit the floor if you're in a bingo hall listening to this, which you never know. People could be. What is also interesting is, are you ready for some words, or do you want to tell me what happened in 1974?
Well, let's have a quick look into the year that was 1974. But I must say, I'm not much of a bingo player. So when you said hit the floor, I had flashes of Saturday Night Fever with the open shirt, walking into the changing colour dance floor and just hitting that floor with confidence. But 1974 in Australia. was a bit of an interesting year. I wouldn't say anything completely outrageous happened, but a little bit that might have something to do with today's themes, starting with Cyclone Wanda, which in 1974 made landfall near Double Island Point, and that left large parts of southeast Queensland, particularly Brisbane and northern New South Wales, completely flooded. Now, this one's a bit, I don't know if you say ironic, but considering the odd turn of events that came with the supposed lies to the French regarding submarines. But I didn't realise that in 1974, French President Pompidou, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, reaffirms that France would continue to hold nuclear tests in the South Pacific, which of course resulted in, I suppose, a politically angry response from Australian Unionists and the New Zealand government. Yeah, so it would seem our friendship, or at least our relationship, was always a little bit hit hot and cold, shall we say? Yeah. Now, if you're a crime fan, I suppose this might be a good fuel for our story. But on the 3rd of February, there was a riot of 250 inmates, and it erupted at Bathurst Jail. Now, at least 9 prisoners were shot, and a large part of the jail was destroyed by fire. So I'm sure that would have been all over the news on the day. Now, acting Immigration Minister, Senator Dr. McClelland, I've got all the cool names today, announced that he was going to, or will exercise his powers under the Passport Act to cancel the passports of Alexander Barton and his son, who at the time were residing in Rio de Janeiro. And I was reading that thinking, well, what's that so important? Well, apparently, so just a month later, the New South Wales government then issued warrants for the arrest of Alex Barton, who was a millionaire businessman, and his son Thomas, while they were in Brazil, basically so that the federal government could have them extradited from Rio de Janeiro, because apparently the Bartons left Australia with their wives soon after the collapse of their companies and the loss of more than $250 million of the public's money, which is a lot. I'm guessing if you were to convert that from $74 to 2023 dollars. Ironic now that it's just common practice for most politicians to actually take the money from Australia and store it overseas in other banks, but that's for another cynical joke somewhere down the track. Now, on the 26th of February, Mungo Man, which was a human skeleton estimated to be 40,000 years old, was uncovered at Lake Mungo. This one I found interesting because I never knew we had miles at any point. Australia's road signs on the 1st of July switched from imperial to metric.
Oh, there you go. That's because you're so young, Darren.
Well, I don't know about that, but I wasn't driving in 74 or 73, that's for sure. This is pretty cool. In October, the very first Australian credit card, the bank card, was introduced.
I remember that. Yeah, that was very exciting.
I still remember when my parents had a business when I was a little taco with the old sliding credit card things. And you had the 1-800 hotline, I think it was, to ring up to see if a card was stolen.
Yes.
Now, we started with a bit of a cyclone, and of course the year ended with a bit of a cyclone. On the 24th of December, Cyclone Tracy, of course, devastated the city of Darwin, which was huge. There was the official death toll, I believe, was 71. So just, 2 cyclones. I think there was actually another mini cyclone at some point during that year. So definitely a year of weather. But on the brighter side of things, Ronald Mackay's novel The Mango Tree won the Miles Franklin Award. The movie The Cars That Ate Paris, directed by Peter Weir, was released.
I remember that.
and of course, something that's very important for Australian culture, considering for some bizarre reason, I saw an article recently about him being on stage dropping his pants. I did not read the article, but the long-running popular music program Countdown first started screening.
Yes, Countdown.
And if for all the sport fans out there, 74 is a pretty pivotal point for Australian soccer team, because the Australian team made its very first World Cup appearance when it competed in the 1974 FIFA World Cup. And when it comes to inventions, speaking of sporting events, in 1974, the Super Sopper. Gordon Withnail, at the age of 56, or should I say Gordon Withnell, at the age of 56, invented the Super Sopper, which at first I thought was one of those cool guns you could shoot people with water, but no, it's a giant rolling sponge used to quickly soak up water from sporting grounds so that play can continue.
Ah, there you go.
And that is a snapshot of 74 in Australia.
Ah, beautiful.
Was there any good slang happening around that time?
Well, Well, I don't know whether it's particularly at that time, but I've certainly got some good slang that I'm happy to share. As always, it is from the School of Literature, Languages and Linguistics at the Australian National University in the College of Arts and Social Sciences. Now, there are a stack of D words, so I'm going to pick my way through them a little bit and just see what is going to be of interest to people. So I figure something that is quintessentially Australian is digger.
Ah, yes,
so
of course.
If I say digger, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So they share here that digger is an Australian soldier, and the term was applied during the First World War to Australian and New Zealand soldiers because so much of their time was spent digging trenches. An earlier Australian sense of digger was a miner digging for gold. Billy Hughes, who was Prime Minister during the First World War, was also known as the Little Digger, and this first recorded in 1916. So yeah, the Australian Soldiers magazine in February of 1918 said about the origin of the word digger that it came to France when the sandgropers gave up digging on the goldfields of WA and carried on with it on the battlefields. So there you go. That is
interesting.
digger. Now, if I said something was done like a dinner, would you know what I was meaning?
Done like a dinner or winner chicken dinner. But yeah, done like a dinner, definitely.
So comprehensively outwitted or defeated. And the quote they've got here, which may upset some people, Collingwood was done like a dinner in the grand final. So there you go. The phrase was first recorded in 1847. So the origin's uncertain, but a common variation is done like a dog's dinner, which implies a meal devoured with enthusiasm and the bowl licked clean. This may give a clue to the source of the phrase. If you are done like a dinner, you are completely and efficiently demolished. So there you go. Another one, which is sort of a variation on a theme of one that I would have used and that I still use, is Dolly's wax. Have you ever heard about being full up to Dolly's wax?
No, I can't say I've ever heard that one, actually.
Okay, so my nanny used to say full up to Dolly's bow. And would you like more dessert? No, I'm full up to Dolly's wax, or my nana, Dolly's bow. And it's a rather old-fashioned phrase which means that you've eaten enough. And it refers to the time before plastics were widely used, when children's dolls had wax heads attached to cloth bodies. So the example illustrates the way origins of words and phrases can be lost with changes in technology. And so when you say you're full up to Dolly's bow, well, that's, you're full up to your chin, basically. You can't fit any more in. So the expression has several variants, including fed up to Dolly's wax, which means, and its meaning doesn't always denote being full with food. And in 1943, in the Australasian in Melbourne on the 10th of July, the quote is, "There are books on this and books on that about past, present and future international relations, all deadly dull. And I am fed up to Dolly's wax with them." So there you go. That's, yeah.
Well, deadly dull has its own sharpness to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed it does. One that I feel that you probably would have heard is a Dorothy Dixer. Have you heard of a Dorothy Dixer?
Look, to be honest, it sounds familiar, but if you ask me what it means, I could not begin to tell you.
Okay, so as a facilitator of large crowds and big meetings, I'm used to a Dorothy Dixer. So this is, in fact, what the meaning is. It is a parliamentary question asked of a minister by a member of the party in government to give the minister an opportunity to deliver a prepared reply. So basically, it's a plant. Someone in the audience gives you one of these, and
it's a handball.
It's a handball.
Free goal.
That's it. It comes from Dorothy Dix, the pen name of Elizabeth Gilmer, 1870 to 1951, who was an American journalist who wrote a famous personal advice column, which was syndicated in Australia. Her column came to seem a little too contrived, as if she was writing the questions as well as the answers. So this was first recorded in the 1930s. For a discussion about the youth of Dorothy Dixer and rhyming slangs, you can have a look at Dorothy's and Michelle's in the Auswords newsletter of the Australian National University. Encourage you to do that. So that is a Dorothy Dixer, but sometimes, if you're not sure if people are going to be a little bit shy, it's good to say, let me just give you half a dozen questions that you might want to have a think about to get you started, and then away you go. People go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll be able to do that. I'm going to give you one more.
Like
Deb.
a ring-in.
Absolutely, like a ring-in. Yes, for sure. So I'm going to give you drop bear. So do you know about drop bear?
Yes, well, I'm not sure if I've told the story, but I'll do continue and I'll tell you the drop bear
You're
story.
telling
at the
about,
moment.
okay. So drop bear is a jocular name for an imaginary animal similar in appearance to a koala, which is of course not a bear. Can I repeat for all our international visitors? Koalas are not bears, with very sharp claws and teeth that is said to devour tourists, etc., after dropping down on them from trees. And I must admit, I have been guilty of saying, look out for the drop bears. The term is often associated with the fooling of gullible international tourists, and has accordingly been used this way in television advertisements. There are suggestions that the term drop bear emerged in the Second World War period, but the first record is from the 1980s. So, N. Keesing, in Lily on a Dustbin, the drop bears are creatures of a tall story. They were invented during World War II for the benefit of gullible American servicemen. And allegedly it's a dangerous kind of koala. So there is that. I do, however, have a beautiful book that I picked up at the Mountain Riders Festival called Drop Bear, which is by Evelyn Araluen. She's a First Nations poet, and she has, tongue-in-cheek written all her poetry and put it under the Drop Bear name. So yes, and you'll have to read her book to find out why she did that. So it's really good. I'm really enjoying that. So there you go. Drop Bear, another D from the Australian National University School of Language and Linguistics. So I think that's probably enough D's. Tell me about your drop bear story.
Oh, well, I can't remember if I brought this up on there before, but a good friend of mine who lives literally around the corner, but every time I swing by his house, on the left on the road, there was a sign saying, watch out for drop bears. And it was like on a corner house, and I just figured it was, people having a laugh or whatever. And one day I said to him, have you been done by the drop bear yet? And he's like, what is a drop bear? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because he was actually originally from England. And
Right.
so I explained to him, it's just having a laugh about, killer koalas dropping from the trees.
Yeah.
It wasn't a week later that he was driving home at night, had to slam on the brakes because there was a koala on the middle of the road right there. So it turned out there was actually a koala in the tree, and it was their fun way of saying, hey, watch out, there's a koala that hangs out here.
There you go.
So the drop bear turned out to be real. The last place I would have expected for there to be a koala, definitely. But I'm curious, done like a dinner.
Done like a dinner, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's different in each state or how it works, but when it comes to dinner, growing up, I always knew it as tea. Tea's ready. Then some people call it dinner. Then I've heard some people call it supper. What was it? What was it when you were growing up? What was the evening meal title?
Yeah, no, we would have said tea, cup of tea.
Yeah, tea. Yeah. So there we go.
Yeah, but done like a dinner is still kind of generic enough that people go, oh yeah, okay.
We're going to have to bring in tanked like a tea. Oh, that doesn't quite work, does it?
No, doesn't do it at all.
No. Well. Well, it is episode number 74. It is our first episode for the futuristic 2023. How about we jump to some news?
News is good.
You beauty.
A little news from the world of writing. Let's look at books and publishing first. And if you're not a member of Books and Publishing, which is inside the Australian and New Zealand book industry, have a think about jumping on and subscribing, because there are some really great articles that keep you in touch with what's happening in the industry. This one, which was published on the 11th of January 2023, is the release of an issues paper which kicks off copyright review. So the Attorney General's Department has released the issues paper on copyright enforcement as part of a review into whether Australia's current copyright enforcement regime is fit for purpose. Purpose would be good. So the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus said the review would consider whether the copyright enforcement mechanisms in our laws remain appropriate, effective and proportionate. So the issues paper came out in December. It's got a 12-week consultation process. It closes on the 7th of March. So it says that the government is committed to copyright laws to protect Australian artists and enable them to earn a living from their creative works. Given all of the work, all of the access that people have through electronic articles and all of those kind of things, this is something that we should be really aware of. And they are looking at current and emerging enforcement priorities and challenges. So the Australian Publishers Association has said it will circulate a draft submission to interested parties for comment, use or endorsement. So if you want to have a look, there is a link to the Attorney General's Department to have a bit of a look. Encourage people, if this is your jam, to look at, contracts, and if you love that kind of detail and those kind of things, jump in and get a load of the issues paper. So that's a pretty serious one, but important if we're all going to, as artists, earn our money from our art. Another one that I want to say, which is also on Books and Publishing, is that they have listed the Indie Book Awards 2023. The long lists were announced on the 8th of December. And jump in and have a bit of a look. They've got the categories are fiction, non-fiction, debut fiction, illustrated, non-fiction, children's and young adult. Very nice to see Holden Shepherd's The Brink there, which is a lovely book. Really good. So lots of people there. And again, lots of beautiful Australian authors there putting their work out and getting them long listed in the Indie Book Awards. So that is very, very good. And the other news that I wanted to share was some writing comps that are going. So the Stella Prize, the key dates are that the long list will be announced on the 2nd of March, the short list will be announced on the 30th of March, and the winner on the 30th of April. So if you are interested in taking part in the Stella, get in there, go to stella.org.au and get your work happening. Westerly Magazine. If you're a mid-career writer looking for support in producing new work in 2023, applications for a mid-career fellowship are closing on the 20th of January. So you've got a few days to jump in, and 2 fellows will receive support in publishing new work as well as a $2,000 bursary. So the copyright agency Cultural Fund is actually doing that. One of the other things, that's right, that I wanted to mention in terms or in connection to the Stella is that they've been doing over summer celebrating the incredible work of Australian libraries. And so at stella.org.au you can click on a link which says Ask a Librarian, and they've got a series of little articles on librarians reflecting on the social, personal and political importance of libraries to Australian society. So Ask a Librarian, Why Australian Libraries Matter is a really fabulous little read. So people from all over, and talk about libraries being safe places, being places for education, being havens, being creative soups to do, all sorts of things. So it's really lovely to have a bit of a look at that. So I think that's enough news for now. Have you got
plenty
some
of news.
Have you got some new books for us to talk about?
Oh, I will definitely I thought I'd save them for our very first Café for the year.
Oh,
but
yes.
I've definitely got some news.
Got some news? All right.
A couple of news.
Bring on
So
the news.
the first news, of course, is a bit of apology to anyone who has been, who I've missed over the last few weeks, over Christmas and New Year. The news being that I guess I had the wind taken out of my sails a little bit more than I expected, or that I was willing to admit. So I was down for the count, and so there's been a little bit of a lull in proceedings, but that's past. The sun's here, the summer's here, so the energy's coming back. And that also means that with summer comes the Fringe Festival here in South Australia, and of course that includes the Writers' Festival. Now, look, there's just so much happening, but the official program isn't going to be announced till February. Now, at this stage it's scheduled for the 4th of March to the 9th of March. That's for the Writers' Festival, or the Writers' Week, or that's the festival, but some of the dates don't quite match up, but they're all yet to be confirmed. But what I'd like to do is let you know just a couple of things they're slowly announcing. The first is called A Celebration of the Life and Work of Tom Stoppard. So that's going to be on Thursday, the 2nd of March. I don't know too much about Tom Stoppard, but apparently he's a very famous playwright, and includes a virtual interview and discussion, so that should be fun. We have David Hare Live, Sunday 5th of March. I believe he's a British political writer, if I remember correctly. We have Insiders with David Spear, which is going to be a free event on Monday the 6th of March at 6:30. We have Kids Day for readers aged 2 to 11. That's going to be on Saturday the 4th of March. And we have Middle Grade and YA, or Young Adult Day, on Sunday the 5th of March. There's just a tiny little snippet of some of the events coming. And obviously, as we move closer to the Fringe and the Writers' Festival, which is going to be massive, I just thought I'd slowly, each episode, just to reveal a few of the authors that are going to be there. The lineup is massive. I'm going to announce all the Australian authors as we get closer, but just to give you a taste of some of the international authors coming. We have Hala Alian, who is the author of the novel Salt Houses, which was the winner of the Dayton Literary Peace Prize and the Arab American Book Award, and finalist for the, I hope I pronounced this right, Chautauqua Prize, and is also the author of the forthcoming novel The Arsonist City, and 4 award-winning collections of poetry, most recently the 29th year. So that's Hala Alayan, so we'll find out when she's going to be presenting. We also have Catherine Angel, who I believe is from Great Britain. Catherine is the author of Unmastered and Daddy Issues, and she directs the MA in Creative and Critical Writing at Birkbeck, University of London. So it's going to be a good one. We have Simon Armitage, also from Great Britain. Simon was Oxford Professor of Poetry from 2015 to 2019, and in May 2019 was appointed UK Poet Laureate. He has published 12 full-length collections. So if you're into poetry or a poetry lover, you're probably aware of Simon Armitage, so great opportunity to hear him speak. Now we have Shalom Oslander from the USA. Now, he was raised in Muncie, New York, nominated for the Corrit Awards for Writers Under 35. He has published articles in Esquire, the New York Times Magazine, Tablet Magazine, the New Yorker, and has had stories aired on NPR's This American Life. And another international author I just wanted to, slowly reveal, but we've got an author, or at least an author and I guess you could say political activist now, but William Bill Browder from America. Now, interestingly enough, a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast that involved interviews with all different people for all different subjects, and this gentleman came on, and it was absolutely riveting. And then here he is now. I discovered that he's going to be right here in my little city called Adelaide for the Writers' Festival, which is pretty amazing. So I'll definitely be doing what I can to get there. But anyway, Bill Browder was founder and CEO of Hermitage Capital Management. He was the largest foreign investor in Russia until 2005, when he was denied entry to the country after exposing widespread corruption. So since 2009, when his lawyer Sergei Magnitsky was murdered in Russian police custody, he has been leading a global campaign to expose human rights abuses endemic in Russia. So consequently, the Sergei Magnitsky Rule of Law Accountability Act was signed into US law in 2012, imposing visa bans and asset freezes on certain officials involved in Magnitsky's death. Browder is currently working to have similar legislation passed across the European Union. If you can track down, I can say it was on the Jordan Harbinger podcast, which is an American podcast, I guess, but he interviews people from around the world. It is absolutely fascinating. He was basically one of the first people to work out a way to go over and invest in the Russian economy and the Russian businesses and I guess the equivalent of their stock market. And of course, it spirals out of control, leading to the death of his lawyer and tortured before death. So it's absolutely gut-wrenching and gripping tale. So that will be definitely an interesting, to say the least, discussion to hear William talk about. But that is just a snippet, and I mean a tiny snippet, of some of the international authors coming to our southern state for the Writers' Festival. As we moved closer to the actual launch and when the proper timetables are released in February, I'll be bringing in a whole lot more to the news, because it's going to be probably, I suspect, one of the biggest ones yet, especially after all the COVID stuff. This one's going to be huge, and can't wait. So it's a good sign. Summer Fringe, where things are coming back, it's going to be amazing. So that is my news for episode 2023.
Good news.
Should I say first episode in 2023? There'll be more coming.
And the Perth Fringe is on before the Adelaide, isn't it? Because people tend to do the rounds and come Perth. Adelaide.
I know of no other Fringe. There is only one Fringe.
Oh, sorry. Look, I was actually going to give you a compliment and say that my son's girlfriend, who performs in those festivals, did say Adelaide was the best. But I'm going to take that back now. So
no, I hope that the Fringe can go to every city in Australia. It's a beautiful time. It's it's just wonderful to see the city come alive in such an international flavours and flair and street bars and entertainers. Yeah.
For those who want to know about Western Australia's Fringe Festival, Fringe World Festival is on the 20th of January to the 19th of February. So there you go.
Yes, well, we're definitely going to have to look into the timetable and bring some of that into the next news for sure. To be honest, I didn't even realise it was on over in WA. So that's how heaven and sand
a
I've
little
been
bit
the last
insular
month.
there in South Australia, Darren.
Well, yes. I've been digital free almost for a small period.
You
I'm just
have.
discovering. Tell me about this news thing that you can see, you can read about. But, well, that's our news for episode 74. But I think it's time to maybe jump into our Readers Cafe and have a
Bring
chat
it
about
on.
a couple of
Yeah.
books. Why not? Let's go.
So in the Readers Cafe, what are we drinking today, Darren?
Well, I'm literally and figuratively drinking a nice strong black coffee to charge up a little bit of the afternoon. But it's a summer spirited coffee, so because I'll be going to the beach after. Yeah. Although it's only taken me, lots and lots of years, but I finally discovered, I could think ahead on these. The last week where we've had temperatures in excess of 35, 36,
Yep.
I can make my plunger coffee at night and put it in the fridge and have an ice cold black coffee in the morning. Never occurred to me. This is why someone like myself will never get the human race to the moon or Mars or beyond.
Oh, that is hilarious. In your iced coffee, do you put ice cream or ice blocks, or is it just cold coffee?
Literally cold black coffee. So I
there you
guess
go.
it's yeah.
Well, on that same vein, I'm actually drinking cold chai, which, in case you don't know, is tea. It is black, and I drink it all day. I usually make a pot in the morning and drink it all day. I have got it cut now because, and this is a very good cafe story, we have I made a cake today, which was, I had some boysenberries which had ripened, and I was desperate to pick them before the birds got them. And we brought some plums up from the beach. We had a plum tree down the beach and picked those. They were blood plums, so they were a little bit sour. They weren't quite ready. So my niece stewed them up, and I made like an almond cake to mix to go on top of it. But we did it as an upside down cake, and just had a piece of that in the cafe with, a couple of cups of tea. It was really, really good. So there you go. Set the scene for you people. Nice sour summer fruits upside down cake and a cup of chai tea.
But that's not all, because I think you've started a summer challenge. Is that right?
Indeed I have. So I do like Goodreads. I know people say it's a bit, one-sided. It's just... Anyway, I do like Goodreads because for me it allows me to remember what books I've read and where I'm up to. So every year Goodreads put out a reading challenge, and if you want to read more in 2023, you can actually stay on track and track your progress, and they'll keep a track of the books you've read and all those kind of things. You can say books you're currently reading, you can add tags to books, so I've got all my Aussie authors tagged and all those kind of things, so that if someone says, what was that book you read, told us about, blah, 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 I can go onto Goodreads and have a bit of a look. I have also got another app which I'm called Library thing, which I'm tagging all my own books, but anyway, because of course I borrow books from the library as well. So for 2023, I have said that I will read 125 books. So that's
so what's that? Just under 3 a week.
Yes, which is, I read a lot. So I read on my Kindle. I read, which is a Samsung Kindle tablet thing. I read paperbacks, and I listen as I'm doing stuff about the house or going for a walk or whatever. So I always have a book, and I read, like, I've got about 4 books on the go at once. At the moment I'm reading Sand Talk by Tyson Younger Porter. I'm reading Drop Bear by Evelyn Araloon, and because it's poetry I'm reading just one or two a night as I go off to sleep and thinking that. I'm listening to The Autumn Castle by Kim Wilkins, and let me just see what else I'm actually reading. The other thing I'm reading is Growing Up in Country Australia, which is a series of short stories, and we had the mother of one of my son's friends. She wrote a story in here, and I went to the launch, which was up in Woodend, which was good. And I'm also reading Talking Up to the White Woman by Aileen Morton Robson, and it's taken me a long time to read that because that's quite a dense academic work, and I'm reading and reflecting and thinking about it, and then I'll come back and do another little bit of it. So, some easy ones, some not so easy. But I did want to say that I already have 6 books down for 2023. So I've read None of the Ninth, and because my children and my husband know, and they gave me books, I reckon I got probably 15 books for Christmas.
Nice.
Which is brilliant. So I've read None of the Ninth, which was the Lot 2, number 3 by Tamsin Muir. That's really good. That's about zombies, lesbian zombies in space. It's brilliant. I read the trilogy. So before Christmas I did The Poppy War, and then I read The Dragon Republic and the Burning God, which is R.F. Kuang's fantasy series. I listened to Jay Kristoff's the third in the Lifelike series, True Life, which was good. That's just a fantastic dystopian story by Jay's an Australian writer. And I read The Patient Doctor by Ben Bravery. Now, with Hayley Walsh, who has her own podcast, the Right Words podcast, she's asked me to chat with herself, because both of us being nurses, we are going to chat with Ben Bravery. So Ben is in fact a doctor, but first of all he was a patient who had bowel cancer, and so this is his story, and also his insight into some of the problems with the medical profession and the health industry and all of those kind of things, and how we could do better. So that was interesting. But Matt Haig's The Midnight Library I read, which I've been on my list for a while. That was fantastic. This is, Darren, about there's a library between life and death. This woman arrives in the library and she gets the book of regrets, and she looks at the regrets, and she gets a chance to live all these parallel lives so that she can see if she changed her mind, if she decided not to do a podcast with her friend from Victoria, or if she decided she would go to the Perth Fringe Festival, and all of the regrets. It was absolutely fascinating. So I love that. So yeah, those are the 6 books that I've already read this year, and the few that I've got on the go. So read, people, get out there. So many beautiful books to read, whether they are Australian authors or not. Entertain, educate, enlighten.
Wow, that'd have to be an interesting read. I mean, because surely deep down we all maybe have some regrets that, you say you wouldn't change anything for the world, but there are probably some things I'd definitely come close to wishing I could redo, due to regret. But saying that, all those mistakes, all those things that I regret also go into, they're the building blocks of who I become. So, pull that one little thread away, does it have ramifications down? So it's, that's a very thought-provoking, should I say thought experiment to keep me up until 5 in the morning. Thank you, Veronica.
Yeah, no worries at all. So I asked my son and his girlfriend, who I happened to be nearly finished reading the book when I was chatting to them, and I said, what would you change? Is there anything that you wish you'd decided differently? Because they're in their late 20s and they're renovating a bus at the moment to go and, drive around Australia and do lots of different things. And they said, actually, no. Even stuff that was tough, exactly as you've said, that they felt that those experiences brought them to this exact moment, and they were pretty happy with where they were. So, yeah, it's good.
Although I must admit there is a roundabout if leaving Smithfield going into Cairns, so when I used to live up in North Queensland, and it was raining, and I was heading to a Western Union money transfer place, whatever it is, in Cairns Central there, and the weather got a little bit nasty, so I decided to turn around. So I went around this roundabout and came back the other way, headed back home, because I was very interested back then in Bitcoin right at the start, and I was off to buy $250 worth at 27 cents. So that is one regret, because that roundabout cost me potentially, I haven't done the math, but at the peak when it was like nearly $100,000 per Bitcoin. So what's that? It would have been 20, 30. I don't want to know.
I wouldn't do that, man.
Let's just say there's a multi-million-dollar roundabout back in time, which I'd happily keep driving straight. But then again, then I get rich, and then maybe my halo shatters into a million pieces, and so we don't know. But speaking of books, I've got a couple of fantastic books I would like to spotlight on. Yeah, so brand new listings on the website. The first one, now it's actually, it's a book, but it's actually 3 titles into one volume, and this is called the Exiled Rogue series by author Sandeep Adnani, and this is you'll find it under our fantasy. Exiled Rogue series, basically, I'll read the description because it's 3 books. So, with a story that spans more than 120 years, the Exiled Rogue series is the complete offering of 3 Amazon #1 bestsellers: The Codes of the Exiled Rogue, The Origin of the Exiled Rogue, and The Prophecy of the Exiled Rogue. It starts as an existential crisis, develops into a clandestine meeting to discuss life and its purpose, then quickly escalates into something deeper and more profound. The characters journey through life and beyond, uncovering truths that the human mind has grappled with since the dawn of time. A larger plan for humanity and the evolution of each being is revealed as our characters traverse time and space in different realms, all of which have laws of their own. Though the dimensions are distinct, they flow beautifully and logically into each other to form a whole, invoking a sense of déjà vu. Written by award-winning author Sandeep Adnani, this trilogy will help you appreciate the joy and wonder of being alive and look forward to the dimensions that await us upon our departure from this world. Now, those books have won awards including award-winning finalist Fiction Visionary 2021 International Book Award, award winner Science Fiction Alien Space 2021 American Fiction Awards. It was also a finalist at the 2021 Best Book Awards. It was a silver medal winner in the Metaphysical and Visionary Fiction 2022 Global Book Awards, and was an award-winning finalist in the American Fiction 2022 American Fiction Awards. So each of the book of the series has won prizes of some description. So what a fantastic sudden listing. So again, that is the Exiled Rogue series by Sandeep Adnani under our fantasy section, and that is 3 titles all combined into one volume: The Codes of the Exiled Rogue, The Origin of the Exiled Rogue, and The Prophecy of the Exiled Rogue. So I'm thinking not just fantasy, but maybe even science fiction there too. So many stuff there. Completely different style. Would like to jump into historical fiction. I'd like to spotlight a book by author Catherine Mccullagh. And this is actually, I understand it was her first book, which she's got another book with us already, but this is her first, this is her first fiction book, and it was called Dancing with Deception, again under our historical fiction. It's described as follows. Marissa Carnarvon is an enigma to her family. In 1938, she turns her back on her family's money and status and leaves her comfortable pre-war Sydney lifestyle to become a nurse in a London city hospital. Against the backdrop of a looming conflict, she moves to a Red Cross hospital in Paris in July 1939, totally unprepared for the challenge of life in an occupied city. As the conflict threatens to escalate, Marissa's position becomes increasingly precarious as the resistance hunts for a traitor in the organisation. Suspicion falls on one of the hospital's doctors and he is murdered, throwing Marissa into the resistance firing line. So that is Dancing with Deception by author Catherine Mccullagh. If you love historical fiction, you are going to be in great hands, because Catherine trained as a history and language teacher before embarking on a 20-year career in the Australian Regular Army as a teacher, linguist and editor of military doctrine and history. So then she left the army and established herself as a freelance editor, primarily in military history. So again, you're in very good hands there with a historical fiction title, Dancing with Deception by Catherine Mccullagh. And that is the 2 books I'd like to spotlight for our very first chilled out cafe session for 2023.
Excellent. All right, I'll see you on the other side of the cafe. See you next time.
Veronica, speaking of amazing authors and stupendously super cool books and stories, and but I believe you had a really, really interesting conversation with our special guest today, and based on her biography, which is sounds absolutely fascinating.
It was brilliant. So we're talking about the author Michelle Tom and her book 10,000 Aftershocks, which is a memoir, and it's about family, fault lines and fallout. I'll give you Michelle's biography and I do the blurb of the story during the interview, so we could sort of leap first to that. And I do want to say thank you to Michelle for giving us a copy of her book 10,000 Aftershocks, a paperback copy for our giveaway, one of our giveaways for the last newsletter, and these prizes have been allocated, so somebody is getting a copy of Michelle's memoir, and somebody else is getting a copy of The Christmas Swap by Sandy Barker, another one of our fabulous Australian authors who's very supportive of ABL. And The Christmas Trip is, part 2 of one of Sandy's Christmas romances. So we did get some interesting entries for why people love Christmas romances. So those have gone out to people, and if you want to be part of our giveaways, get yourself on a subscriber list. It's on the website under Book Lovers tab. But yes, let's just go and listen to Michelle. So many things to talk about, but let's go.
Yeah, and what a powerful title, though. 10,000 Aftershocks is. It instantly encapsulates the mood, doesn't it? Yeah. But super lucky, Veronica. So let's go.
So welcome, book lovers, to another brilliant author interview. And I'm really, really delighted to have with me today Michelle Tom. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Veronica. It's lovely to be here.
Very good. So, Michelle, I'm going to talk about you, so you can just take a moment to blush quietly in the shade there. So, Michelle began her writing career as a print journalist in her native New Zealand. A chapter from 10,000 Aftershocks placed second in the Writers Victoria Marion Grace Wilson Emerging Writers Competition, that's a mouthful, in the non-fiction section in 2019 and appeared in the November issue of The Victorian Writer. So Michelle was selected from the ACT Writers Centre Hard Copy 2019 non-fiction program and was one of 5 writers chosen for a week-long Varuna Memoir Masterclass with Paddy Miller in 2017. Michelle now lives in Melbourne with her husband and 2 youngest children. So whose land are you on today, Michelle? Are you down there in Naarm?
Yes, and I am very grateful to be on Boonwurrung land.
Beautiful. And I'm up here on Woiwurrung country in the Macedon Ranges. So we're all part of the Kulin Nation, kind of all around there. And it's kind of a typical Melbourne day, a little bit of drizzle, a little bit of rain, sunshine and cold. So, yeah, can't ask for more. Great kind cardigan weather.
Hopeful weather.
Hopeful weather it is. So, Michelle, I'm now going to read the blurb for 10,000 Aftershocks, which was your amazing memoir. After Michelle Tom's house was damaged by a deadly magnitude 6.3 earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2011, she and her young family suffered through another 10,000 aftershocks before finally relocating to the stability of Melbourne, Australia. But soon after arriving, Michelle received the news that her estranged sister was dying. Determined to reconnect before her sister died, Michelle flew home to visit, and memories of childhood flooded back. Told through the 5 stages of an earthquake via remembered fragments, Michelle Tom explores the similarities between seismic upheaval and her own family's tragedies. Her sister's terminal illness, her brother's struggle with schizophrenia and ultimate suicide, the sudden death of her father, her own panic disorder, and, through it all, one overarching battle, her lifelong struggle to form a healthy connection with her mother. 10,000 Aftershocks is a powerful, poetic and moving memoir of family violence and estrangement. It weaves together a series of ever-widening and far-reaching emotional and seismic aftershocks in a beautifully written and compelling account of a dark family drama. Wow, is all I can say.
Makes it sound great.
It does make it sound great, but it's so important, isn't it, to get our blurb right from a writing point of view, but also from, to give people a sense of the honesty that is obviously, throughout your memoir. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to put that dark family drama into words?
I was just thinking about this morning as I was vacuuming.
Okay.
I think I just reached a point in my life where I'd had all these losses, these griefs. I'd lost my father at 21, then I lost my brother maybe about 10 years after that, and then a few years later, I'd lost my sister.
Mm-hmm.
I was left, with my mother, who I didn't particularly get along with.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went through the earthquakes in Christchurch, and we lost our house. We relocated to Australia because we just couldn't cope with the threat of any more earthquakes, really. We were done with that whole scene. And I think there was just a dawning of a realization that this was not a normal sort of existence. So this had been a little bit exceptional, all this loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was just the fact of the loss. I think it was realizing that was a bit unusual for someone for someone to suffer losses from so young and for that to continue. And it wasn't that I felt exceptional myself. If anything, the opposite. I felt that these were experiences that everybody had at one point or other. None of us escape losing someone in some capacity. But so for me, I think it was more, there was a recognition of this universal experience, but also particular to me. I wanted to understand better what had happened. I'd come to a point in my life where things in my family, in my family of origin, and my home life, because of the earthquakes, everything had fallen apart. And I wanted to know, how had that happened? Was there one event that had kicked it off, or was it just bad luck? And I was talking to a writing friend, and I've told this story many times. And we were on a writing course at Verona, and she asked me what my book was about, and we were out on a walk. And at the end of that walk, she said, it sounds like when your father died, when you were 21, that was like an earthquake in your family. And it really got me thinking along the lines of combining the two stories and how were there parallels? How did they meet? How did they interconnect? Mm-hmm. And that was really the start of a journey to examine that idea, like the idea of aftershocks, and was there something that kicked off all this loss in the family? Were these deaths ripples? And that was really there was that, and just trying to understand for my own benefit, was there a narrative that I could kind of make tidy so that I could kind of almost set it aside then? I didn't have to keep wondering. I could set it aside, and then I could move on with my life in Australia, new life, which I felt very privileged to have, having lost my younger siblings. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that covers the complexity of what brings you to the keyboard and makes you go, okay, let's get going.
Yeah, it's almost like externalizing it. That sense that popped up in my mind, being a bit of a coach. That's something that I often ask people to do, is to give whatever it is that is filling their thoughts, to give it a shape or a character or a colour or something. But it feels like you gave it the shape of the aftershocks and match that to put it in the boundary so that you could put it away, you're saying.
Yeah, and I think there was something therapeutic in making, and I always sort of balk at saying this because it sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but in making art out of tragedy, of taking it as sort of clay and moulding it into something that made sense, that looked... I always had this mantra while I was working that I wanted to take all these terrible situations and make beauty out of them. And the best way that I could do that with the skill set I had was with words. The ironic thing is that when I reached Australia, I was not in a good way. I was quite traumatised by everything that had happened during the earthquakes. And I ended up in therapy, and my counsellor was constantly encouraging me to write, write a diary, keep a journal. And I pushed back against her so hard. So she finds it absolutely hilarious that I now have the book out, because I think eventually that's just the way that I maybe her messages reached me on some level, even though I was sort of doing the knee-jerk no. Eventually I realised that, I have to do this.
Yeah. I do not think at all, though, that is airy-fairy. I think that the creation of art as therapy for yourself and the fact that it has obviously become therapy for so many more people that they've read it, I think that is a brilliant thing.
Yes, well, that's the hope, isn't it? That's always you hope that it's all for something that will help someone else.
Yeah, because it's incredibly brave, I feel, to write a memoir and put it into the world, to share those vulnerabilities with outsiders, with people that you don't even know. Lovely to share it with, writers when you were away at Verona, or your family, or, partner and those kind of things, and friends. But, yeah, knowing that strangers will read it, I think is incredibly brave.
I think if you've gone through things like that and you acknowledge what you've survived, I think there's very little that other people can say that would destroy you.
That's true. That is true.
A good sense of your own strength, and there was certainly there was nervousness putting it in the world. Don't get me wrong, but there was also a sense of I have survived this. I'm going to own it, and why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think more people should do that. Acknowledge what you've come through. There's memes and things that say, remember you've survived every day up until now. Don't forget to give yourself credit.
What do you think were some of the core things that kept you going, and not only that, but then allowed you to thrive?
Oh, you mean in the writing of the book?
Yeah.
In the writing? Oh, and I've read about this with other memoir writers in particular. There was a very strange obsession that it just had to be done. And part of that is an awareness of mortality, that if I don't get this written, the story could die with me. Because, my sister took stories with her and my brother took stories with him.
Yeah.
And that awareness that every person is a library, we all have that within us. And when every person dies, we lose those stories. So there was that sense of wanting to get it down for my kids and maybe head off any intergenerational trauma. Maybe if they could read this later, they might think, maybe that's where that comes from in me, and explain it and help them. But it was also to honour those lost siblings. They didn't have the chance or the skills to do this, and they missed out on so much. They never had children of their own. Neither of them married. And I know that's a very conservative view of the world, that those are, the only options. But my sister in particular had a lot of trouble with mental ill health. She spent many years alone in her flat in Wellington. She didn't really live, she existed. And my brother suffered with schizophrenia, which was just its own living hell. There are some things worse than dying, and I think really bad schizophrenia is one of those things. So it was to honour the fact that they'd been here, they'd left their mark, and I wanted to do that for them. Yeah. Maybe I felt like I hadn't done enough as a sister. So this was what I could do this. I could do this in retrospect. Yeah.
And what do you think personally then that you drew from creating the book and putting those stories down in words?
Oh, well, I very much felt them around me, very much. And I even visited a psychic, and she told me before, I just had a rejection from a publisher, and I was quite disheartened, and I already had the appointment, and I went along, and she said, no, another really good publisher is going to sign this book. And I said to my husband, it's just tosh. Rubbish. Never going to happen. I was a bit down on myself at that point.
Yeah.
And then it all, the things that she'd said came through, and she said, this is what they are doing. Your brother and your sister are working on this.
Oh, they're wonderful.
And it was just so freaky that it all came to pass. And some people will poo-poo that, but I really felt them close, and still do, I think. And it just, I think that's where the obsession came in, that I felt them so close. I didn't want to let them down. It's all about love, right? It's about those bonds that continue long after someone's gone. And I was listening to Anderson Cooper has a new podcast out about grief. And I was just listening to that the other day, and he was interviewing someone who said it's possible to continue a relationship with the dead after they're gone. And I totally get that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because as we grow and change, our way of relating to their story changes.
Yeah.
And that I think that's what was happening. I was growing within that relationship with them, even though they were no longer here.
Yeah, and perhaps it allowed you to understand them a little more as you explored what they meant to you and what those stories were that you were prepared to share.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that is brilliant, and I absolutely agree with you. We can certainly maintain that. Tell me, Nan, when you're writing the book, how long does it take you to put all those stories in play, and does it sort of slot into that really lovely, the 10,000 aftershocks? Does it, slot into the earthquake paradigm easily, or is that something you had to plot very hard to put in place?
Oh no! Once I started, it was eerily. This is why I say I felt like I had some guidance, because I would search for something, and there were several what the hell moments as I was looking at the screen, like, you are kidding me. Like, this
meant to be.
Yeah, like there was the moment that I discovered that the beach, that more than the beach, kind of the probably 200 metre stretch of beach that we used to holiday on as children, was the site of the largest ever earthquake in New Zealand.
Wow.
In the 1860s or 1880s, I can't quite remember the date now. And that was just like, what? We literally holidayed atop this seismically unstable, this incredible, like it's this, I was just blown away by that. And the fact that when we went there, my parents seemed to just become even more chaotic, because we were jammed into this little hut, you know, with no power and no running water, you know, a little outhouse for a toilet. It just ramped up the pressure on their relationship even further. And so, you know, these things were just sort of, it was like they were just laying there waiting for me to find them. There were so many times when that would happen, I'd search something up to do with seismology or whatever, and it would just jump out at me, something to do with my family's history, some location or some event. Or some metaphor for the family dynamic, like the liquefaction and the way that the land just cannot hold together. It was the same as us. We could not hold together. We all let go. So yeah, it wasn't that hard. At the end, I had a lot of fragments that didn't get used because they didn't fit that sort of framework. Yeah. And at the end, I'm just trying to remember, somebody read it and said it needs another. Oh, I know. I asked an editor, a publisher, had I gone too far with the earthquake metaphor, because I felt a little bit like I may have. And she said, no, I think you need to push it harder. And I said, oh, okay. So I went home and I started looking through my notes again, and I found an old reference to the 5 stages of an earthquake. And I looked at the book and I was like, oh my God, it's just sitting there, and it just needs to be divided here, 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 and here. And these are the 5 stages, and there it all is. Yeah. The story just told itself in a lot of ways.
How has the way you were parented changed the way you parent your own children?
Oh boy, have you got another hour?
Well, maybe just give me the highlights there.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot, Veronica. I used to say jokingly that everything that happened in our house, I'd just do a 180 on and do the opposite.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, it's only half joking. I think mainly it's about recognising that your children are each an individual that needs to be allowed to develop and evolve how they want to, how they are going to, and that you aren't, as a parent, in charge of that. We're in charge of caring for them, and we're in charge of keeping them alive until they're old enough to do that for themselves. And obviously we're in charge of nurturing them and loving them. That's a given. But I've never been one to force my ideas of, you know, what they should do for a job or how they should get educated if they want to do university or if they want to do something else completely, if they want to take a gap year or whatever. I kind of, and I think humour is incredibly important in our house, and just respect. I'm huge on respect, and I don't think that was something that was ever a focus for me growing up. There was no one ever apologised to me for anything, and I've always made an effort. I mean, obviously nobody always gets it right 100% of the time, but I do think I've done a better job than my parents.
Yeah. Well, your children will tell you in about 15 or 20 years, I think, is it?
Yeah, exactly. There is no escape.
That's it. And look, we do the best we can at the time, don't we?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me then, visits back to New Zealand, do you pop back from time to time, and how do you feel about that?
Yeah, my eldest daughter has married and she's now living in New Zealand. So COVID dependent,
yes.
We've been kept apart for a wee while now. I love my country. I always get teary when I land and take off, but there's just nothing like home, is there?
Nothing like it. That's exactly right.
But it's it's like a dog that you really love, but that bites you occasionally.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, you really want to pet it and be there with it, but at the same time you're aware that at any moment it might turn on you.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it. It's a very complicated relationship. It doesn't feel like there's anywhere safe in New Zealand for me. We did look, we looked at our options and we were just like, there's just nowhere that feels stable.
And what is it then perhaps about Melbourne, about Naarm, that gives you that sense of safety, you and the family? What do you think are the elements that make that up? Because it's rarely just one thing.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know why. I think initially it was just that it had no seismic history. When you're that traumatised by that one, you're just looking for the place that doesn't have it. My husband's Canadian. We'd looked at British Columbia, but then we realised, oh no, that fault along that coastline is, overdue. So no, can't do that. And you become quite single-minded about the thing that you're trying to avoid. And I mean, the first couple of years, I think we were here, there were bushfires near the city, and it was like, oh dear. Yeah. We didn't think about that.
We do have our disasters, just not quite the same.
Yeah, you sort of get a little bit irrational about your fear of one thing and you forget about assessing the rest of it. Yeah. But that said, I have to say, the book came out and I think it had only been out a couple of months, and there was a massive for Melbourne earthquake here. I think it was a 5.9.
Yes.
And I was lying in bed at the time and I just thought, that's an earthquake, and I could not believe it because it was a good one. That was a really solid shake.
It was. Shook me off the kitchen chair. So, it was pretty massive for Melbourne. Yeah. And
then my phone started going off and people were saying, oh, my God, you were the first person I thought of. Are you okay?
Oh.
Which was lovely. I would say that I can't really explain why we chose Melbourne other than we just really liked it. We'd been here before, and I think there was a little bit of kind of flight involved, like mentally we were just fleeing. But I have to say that it has provided me with the sorts of opportunities, like today, for example, that I just don't think I would have had access to in New Zealand. And I've seen that with my children as well, opportunities for education and employment and advancement that, and just the way, like the kids working part-time jobs, they're paid so much more than their peers in New Zealand, things like that. It's I think it's possibly easy for Australians to not realise how good it is here. We live in a constant state of appreciation for stability and all those other things, those opportunities, and just the variety, the fact that there are so many universities in one city, that sort of thing. You know, there's basically nothing you can't do here if you put your mind to it.
That is true. That is true. And Melbourne's just been awarded the most livable city yet again or something.
Again.
So, yeah. So there you go, Sydney. Just pop that quietly. And Adelaide, I will say to Darren, who's the co-founder, he likes to do a little bit of Melbourne Adelaide, which is, you know, just not even in the running. Okay. Tell me a little bit more. Let's just do a little bit more on the book, and then I want to think about your writing as a process. Are there any secrets hidden in the writing of 10,000 Aftershocks?
Yes, there are. The book, I think, is written in such a way that if you had experienced things as I have as a child, or even as an adult, maybe even more especially as an adult, that you will recognise yourself, or you will recognise the interactions, and you will know. You'll know that I'm someone who is in your cohort.
Yeah.
I think that if you haven't been through those things, you might just skip over that and say, well, the earthquake stuff was interesting, but I don't really jive with the rest of it. But I think, it was written for those people who are out there and feeling lonely, isolated, that they're the only ones who don't feel good enough. They're the only ones that can't get along with a parent and don't understand why this blood bond isn't enough. Yeah, they're the ones that I want to read it and say, oh, I get this. I understand what it's like to not know what to buy a parent, because whatever I get them for their birthday is just never going to be enough. You know, other people who have great relationships with their parents might read that and say, well, so what? You know, it's no great shakes. But if it's just one more thing that you're not good enough at, that starts to sting, and it starts to impact other areas of your life where you don't feel good enough because you didn't get that unconditional love from the get-go.
Yeah.
So you're constantly chasing your tail. You're constantly trying to prove yourself. And I guess part of my message to those people is stop chasing your tail. Just stop. You know, just do your best to find a way out of that situation, because it's just you're on a hiding to nothing. You know, you can bend yourself up like a pretzel. You're never going to please that person. You need to rescue yourself and extricate yourself from that situation so you can build your own strength again. You can build your confidence. And this is easy to say, but it's incredibly difficult when you're craving that love and that connection. When that's the one thing you feel you've always missed out on and other people seem to have. And it must be me. It must be me. It must be why they don't want me or love me or think I'm good enough. It must be some failing I have. And I guess between the lines, I was trying to say, it's not you. It's not you. Your story might not be the same as mine, but if you can see yourself here in this situation like me, it's not you. And you need to start giving yourself that unconditional love and start taking care of that little child that's within you that is still reaching out for it constantly. I've got this friend who's in her 90s and she still doesn't understand why her mother didn't care for her, and she still wakes up early hours of the morning wondering. And I say to her, have you thought about therapy? And she says, oh, I'm too old for that. And I say, no, you're not. You know, you're still alive. You need to not be waking at 4 a.m. and pondering this question, because you're never going to reach an answer on your own. It's just, it really upsets me that so many people live in that state of yearning and they can choose something else. Yeah, it's tough. It's hard, but it's possible. Yeah.
I feel like there's a sense of hope in your book that despite the darkest hours, or because of the darkest hours, or working, whatever you like to call it, that there is light, that there is a life well lived that you've grasped with both hands.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't have the easiest relationship with my father, but I took this positive from him. He sucked the juice out of life, and he didn't waste a minute. He died at 44, but boy, he lived every minute. And I think I took that on very young. And there is hope. There definitely is. It's the way we're programmed. We're programmed to need this from our parents. But when we're older, when we're adults, we can choose to have insight about it, and we can choose to address it. And there definitely is hope on the other side of it. And I think estrangement is a really taboo subject. People don't like to talk about it. People think it comes out of blazing rows at the front of the house, and someone screams away in their car, and that's it. We're not speaking to each other for the rest of our lives. It's not like that in a lot of cases. It tends to be sometimes quite quiet, just slipping away quietly, ghosting if you like. But it can also come after many, there's been research and it shows that it takes many attempts to disengage, to disconnect before it actually takes. Because when it's a parent-child situation and it's the child trying to make that distance, they often find themselves in a position where they fall back into, I just want my mum, or I just want my dad. And so they go back. And I had a situation like that. I had a breast cancer scare, and I thought my initial thought was, gee, it'd be nice to have a mother to call about this right now. I mean, nothing came of it, but I had already gone so far down the road towards being no contact with my mother that I didn't. But I could see how it'd be so easy to just pick up that phone and say, hey, I'm in trouble, I need some support.
Yeah.
And I know that wouldn't be there. It wouldn't be there. So I saved myself in that moment. And, it takes people a while to work through that process of figuring out that, oh, yeah, I tried again and it's still not there. I need to move away again. And they'll often go back many times before they realise that this just isn't going to change. Yeah, but there is definitely hope, but it is a process, and you can't be hard on yourself. You have to be kind through that. You have to forgive yourself if you do need it and you go back. That's not a bad thing. It's just part of being human.
Yeah, and finding the way to live the life that we want.
That's right.
Yeah.
And care for ourselves the best way we can.
Yes, and sometimes art can help. So let's look at when you first considered yourself a writer.
This is really funny because last week, our house was burgled while we were asleep.
Horrible.
Yeah, and I put it on Twitter and I said, thankfully, my laptop was not touched. Because while my latest manuscript was uploaded to the cloud, all my research is on my laptop. And somebody said, oh, thank goodness your laptop was okay. And I said, yeah, it was the first thing I checked once we realised. And my friend Ryan said, now you can say, when people ask you, when did you first know you were a writer, you can say, that day when I checked if my laptop was still there.
Well, yeah, it is just become a part of you. Yes, we'll take that as a definite. Yeah, no, I quite like that. It's very good.
I don't know if I. Yeah, I mean, I've just always been wordy, I suppose. I guess I read a lot as a kid. We'd go away for these big long holidays in a caravan every summer, which were hell, honestly. And I would just take this box of books, and in about the first week I was done with them. And then I was a librarian when I was about 12 at the town library. I just got appointed by my teacher.
Fantastic.
Which was actually great for me because it was such a peaceful place to hang out.
Libraries are amazing, aren't they? They just, you can almost feel those stories just burbling away kind of in the ether around you, and it's just amazing sensation.
Yeah. Although I joke with my writer friends that now I walk into a library and I'm like, oh, it's like an archive of pain. All that writerly effort and
the striving, you understand the striving now.
yeah, the obsession
and the editing and the
yes, and the rejections and how did all these books get published? It's just incredible. All that human effort is quite. Once you know what goes into one book, and you walk into a library, like humans are incredible.
We are. We absolutely are, because, of course, the ones that we see in the library are perhaps just the 10%. There are, so many manuscripts that never make it to a book, or partial stories that end up in bottom drawers, or orphan files on computers, or just in people's heads.
Yes, exactly. It's just astonishing. Well, I trained as a journalist straight from school, and there were so many aspects of the job that I loved, even aside from the writing. I just love people. I love, even when the police were here for our burglary, I was like itching to ask this young constable how she got started and what she loved about the job. And, bugger the car that's missing. I just want to know I just want to know how you got here. That stuff just fascinates me,
Yeah. Great people watcher then.
Yes, absolutely. And eavesdropper.
Ah, yes, very good. And yes, writers will often think, oh, that's got to go into a book as they overhear something on a train or a tram or in the shop. Yes.
Pull out the phone and take a note,
What sort of stories did you read when you were young, when you were away on these holidays? What were your favourites?
Oh, anything by Agatha Christie,
lovely.
Mysteries, Hardy Boys, anything true crime. I just loved it. Heidi was my favourite book when I was a bit younger.
Lovely.
Just because it just felt so idyllic.
Yes.
I would have loved that.
Yeah.
Trixie Belden.
Oh, Trixie Belden, yes. I remember Trixie Belden,
I was into horses until I fell off one and was dragged around a paddock.
Oh, so, yes, that would put you off a bit.
That ended that love affair. Just the usual, I think the usual girly type. Oh, what we all read that horrifies us as mothers is those Flowers in the Attic stories.
Oh, yes, weren't they horrible? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, we didn't think so at the time. I was just mesmerised by them. But now I'm like, what were we doing?
I remember they came out, I think I was in high school, and they went around, somebody's mother must have let them read it. And so everybody, madly read them as quickly as they could. But there you go. Yeah, yes. Not necessarily something that you'd encourage young girls to read. Yeah. No. And so what books do you read now? What are your favourite genres or non-fiction?
I'm very eclectic. I've started trying to read a little bit more fiction because I'm working on a true crime novel, but I'm fictionalising. But I really, and this is maybe a little bit of an unpopular opinion in Australia. I do read some Australian authors, of course, but I really love American writing.
Why is that? What elements or what parts just appeal to you?
I think it's the sophistication. I think that there's just so much more to choose from, and I feel like they've been doing it a little longer. And so I just enjoy reading the classics, like Faulkner. It's not terribly useful when you're writing today because those sorts of books probably wouldn't be published in that form today. Approved of.
They'd be pruned, edited within an inch of their lives, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. But I do like sometimes to sort of be swallowed up by description in a scene or characterization. It's just my daughter gave me Ethan Frome to read for my birthday, and I really enjoyed that. I'm all over the place, to be honest. I read Nigel Featherston's last book, and I really enjoyed that. Yeah, all over. I just sort of grab something and sink into it, and if it grabs me, I'm reading a bit of Margaret Atwood at the moment, The Robber Bride. That's another one that I thought could probably be pruned a bit. Sorry, Margaret. But I'm not too not too wedded to any particular genre or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to read widely, and if something grabs me, I dive in. If I'm not, I don't finish something if I don't like it. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing I have learned is life's a bit too short.
Yes, to read really bad books, yeah.
Or just something that's not even bad necessarily. It's just not something that grabs me, or the story's not strong enough. It's just too much description or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me your fictional true crime novel you're writing. How far along? Where are you in that?
Oh, I'm reaching in the dark for the end of the first draft. I'm almost there. It's a historical novel, so it sort of covers quite a few different genres. It's historical, it's true crime. It's set in Tasmania, New Zealand, and Melbourne in 1864 and 1865. And it covers a murder trial, and it's feminist in its aspect because the protagonist is a woman who goes in search of vengeance for her dead mother. And it has been a wild ride. I've just loved every minute of it. It was a really prominent case in New Zealand, and then history kind of forgot it. And looking back over the notes, like it was such a big trial that the full transcript is in the newspapers, historical newspapers. And what struck me was that nothing much has changed in over 160 years. This woman was vilified. It was just so similar. So I thought this is so interesting that in so many ways we have not moved forward. Yeah, the characters just spoke to me. I just was so impressed by this young woman. She earned my respect, and she was only 18 or 19, depending on which year you're talking about. And I wanted to explore the idea of what it was like to be 19 in 1865 and being the material witness in a murder trial when she'd also been the victim of an attempted rape and she'd lost her family. You know, how did she get through that? And I think there was a lot I could relate to. She'd lost her family, and that really made me sit up and I thought, wow, okay, here's someone who's kind of in a similar spot that I was way back. And how the heck at 19 did she do that in that time when women were not held in high regard? Yeah, I was just so curious, and I think that's what's sort of kept me going, is my curiosity about how she survived that, how she moved through it and came out the other end.
Amazing.
But it just feels almost impossible to me to do that at that time.
So you mentioned that the transcript was in the papers. How much other evidence or, research have you been able to do around the events, particularly if they've, happened in a couple of Australian states as well?
Oh, it's amazing what you can get your hands on these days. Yep. I've managed to, just recently I found the judge's diary.
Wow.
Which was hidden away somewhere in New Zealand. And I put the call out on Twitter, and a friend of my daughter's actually had just finished her PhD, and she said, I'll go and photograph it for you. So she went and did that, and it's just incredible. Little details, that give it that air of your manuscript's an air of authenticity. Like, we knew that one of the sons in the family was called Francis, and in the judge's diary, this young woman always refers to him as Frankie, and it's like, that just gave me chills, because he's just a little fella. Little things like that. So I look, there's just so much research. I've got photographs of the cities that were involved. I've read books written by people who lived in Tasmania at that time. There were books that they printed for immigrants to tell them about the place they were moving to. So I have several of those for the area of New Zealand where they were moving. and it gives prices of butter and flour and what clothing costs and what you can expect to be growing around your house and what your house would be made of. And that's just,
It's priceless.
Yeah. So it's actually incredible what you can find. And research is really my favorite thing of all, because it's just like prospecting. You're looking for little nuggets, and if you're tenacious, and I happen to be, you eventually do find those nuggets. Yeah.
Obviously a lot of research happening. Is that something, or is that a skill that you've learned from journalism, or has that curiosity always been a part of your makeup?
Oh, look, I can remember steaming open my mother's mail. I think it's both. I think it's both. Yeah. I definitely found more legal ways to do it. But the internet is just incredible, and you can spend a lot of money getting birth certificates and marriage certificates and things like that turn out not to be the people that you're searching
that you're looking for. Yes. Yeah. My husband does a bit of genealogy, and he's had a couple of those disappointments where it's like, oh no, it's not them, but you can't see that until you put the money out. Yeah,
that's right. But there's things like the British Newspaper Archive. That's incredible. Those newspapers go back centuries, and there's just so much information. I think that the main skill is knowing how to search, how to use search terms and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I know a lot of historical fiction writers in Australia love Trove, which is fairly amazing. Has all the Australian history stuff, and as well as published books now as well.
Yes, it's well thumbed by me.
When does research stop and writing begin? Is that something that you?
Yeah, I think you just have.
Yeah,
you get to a point where you're okay. I've got enough now. Well, you actually never have quite enough, right? You're always like, what if I just see if I can find this? I reached a point. When was that? Probably, I think, the start of August, where I thought, Michelle, you're not being productive enough with the actual words on the page. So I started something that I'd never tried before, and I got up at 6 a.m. every weekday, and I kept writing. I'd just get up, I'd make a hot drink, I'd sit down. I wouldn't allow any other thoughts into my brain, like what was coming up for the day or what was for dinner, none of that. And I'd sit down and write 1,000 words, and then when I'd hit 1,000 words, I would stop. And sometimes that would be by 8 o'clock, and sometimes it would take till lunchtime. But that's what I did, and in that way, the manuscript found some momentum. I found some momentum.
Yeah.
And then it sort of just takes on a life of its own, and you start to work out the things that you didn't know that you could fix until you got started. So sometimes I get two in my head, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to structure this before I start writing? But I really know that what I have to do is just write, and the structure will figure itself out as I write. As I figure out what to write, the structure will kind of follow, or if it doesn't, then you fix it up, because then you've got the words to do it with.
It's 6 a.m. writing, very, very productive. Yes, being part of the 6 a.m. writers, Oz Writers on Twitter, I would say yes, that is productive. Although even just to check in sometimes is a bit distracting, and then it's 20 minutes. You think, oh, stop looking at the timeline, just get back to the words.
Yeah, well, I know myself well enough, and I just left my phone in the bedroom, and we're not even doing that. Yeah.
Very good. Tell me the difference for you. What's the sensation of writing non-fiction, writing your memoir, and writing this true crime fiction?
Not so different, funnily enough.
Okay, yep.
Because for the novel, I've tried to stick to known facts as much as possible. I've only invented things where there are gaps, and obviously around people's personas, I'm trying to manufacture who I think they were.
Yeah.
But in terms of dates and events, I'm using what happened. So when I'm writing the event and the knowledge that it actually happened, and I'm writing about, I don't know, a woman being exhumed 3 months after she's buried, and they start slicing into her right there to get samples, and the family are standing there.
Gosh.
I'm there with them, and I'm thinking, this is not something I'm making up. This is what happened to someone, to a young woman, standing there watching that. That is very affecting, and while it wasn't me, I've had enough loss in my life and enough graveside moments that I don't know, there's just something there's an echo there, I guess. Yeah, it's not the same, but it's an echo of something that I've experienced, 160 plus years later. And there have been moments where I've been writing and I've just suddenly realised that I've got tears streaming down my face. And that used to happen with the memoir too. And that was harder because I'd have to take breaks. I'd have to move away from it for a couple of weeks even sometimes, just to kind of calm down and get my head together. I haven't found that with the novel, but I have found it very affecting at times. And I think part of the reason that I can't quite reach the end of the first draft is I do not want to say goodbye to these people. I'm kind of in love with them now.
And this is not a series. This is just a one-off, of course. So it's not like you could perhaps bring them back for a second volume.
Well, you never know.
Well, that's true. You could say, and in 50 years, let's just pop back and see what they're doing. Exactly. Those that are still alive, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me, what was the best writing advice that you were given when you started out?
I think to be consistent and to be in it every day, and I think that in itself just gives you forward motion and it plants it in your subconscious. And there are times when I sit down and it's not coming. I kind of know the scene I've got to write, but I haven't figured out quite how to write it, which way in, which door to take in. And so I will sometimes just write and try and push through and write rubbish in order to find where that point is, where that doorway is. But I always find that if I take a break and then I go away and I cook the dinner, do other things, come back the next morning, sit down, there's always something there. And I'm sure that that's just from a process of continual exposure to the ideas and the story and that forward motion that I'm talking about. It just, it's the subconscious at work, isn't it? That's all it is. You sit down and suddenly you're like, okay, all right, let's try that. And away you go. And even if that wasn't it, eventually you come to a point where you're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the nub of what I'm trying to say. And you can delete the first,
couple of paragraphs, hopefully. Yeah.
So I think it's that. And I think the other really important thing is to be open to critique and not, it's really hard because as humans we want to protect our work and we think it's good, and the fact is that oftentimes it's in need of work, and you've really got to try and distance yourself from it. And I try and think of my work not as a part of me, but as a separate entity. It's almost like when you set up a company. The company is a separate entity to me as the individual. I think of my manuscript as that. It's separate and over there. And you can pull that apart and you can criticize it and you can poke holes in it all you like, because I'm separate. I'm over here.
Yeah.
It's not me. It's just something I made. And if you don't like it, that's okay. That's okay. And if you think I could improve it, that's okay too. And I think you have to kind of foster that type of thinking within yourself to survive in this kind of creative endeavor, because there will always be people who don't like it or who don't see the point of it.
And it's interesting that people will say a piece of visual art that it will strike all sorts of different chords in people, and some will like it and some not, but they don't quite seem to be able to transfer that concept to books and understand that some people are going to love it, some people are going to think it's trash or wrong or boring. But it's just, you know, as you mentioned earlier about the books you prefer to read, it just doesn't get to you. It's just not your thing.
Yeah, I see that a lot on, there's some Facebook groups, book clubs, and there'll be people who post and they say, this book is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just, first of all, I think, oh, God, the
poor writer.
Yeah. But then I think, well, no, they've got that wrong. It's terrible for them. And that's okay, you know? But you don't really have to announce it.
No. If I'm writing a review of something that I didn't really enjoy, I tend to say I didn't really connect. So I didn't really connect with this person, or I found the descriptions overly flowery, or whatever that might be, so that it really is just my opinion and about what that is. And I think that's, you know,
that's fair.
reasonable.
That's fair.
Yeah. Although I still, you know, if it's really bad, I just delete it from my Goodreads list so nobody ever knows I was reading it. I just couldn't give anybody really bad review. Yeah, it's just not in me.
No, not when you know what goes into them.
Yes, that's right. And even if it's not a well-written book, there is, you know, generally, or there are hours of effort have gone into it, and passion and creativity, and so we'll just, you know, let them go on. Somebody else might tell them. That's probably chicken of me, but such is life. You have this book, so have you got a deadline happening for this transcript? For this manuscript?
I haven't, only self-imposed, but I would hope by the middle of next year it would be in some sort of shape. Yeah, good shape. Yeah.
To be going.
I did promise it to my mentor at the end of the year, but as I say, I've overwritten it, and I think a lot of the early part of the manuscript will go. Yeah. So I have to prune it before I send it to her. So, yeah, I think the middle of next year it just takes so long, even with consistent work every day. Because at the moment I'm writing every morning. Even with that kind of consistent effort, it takes such a long time. And I think particularly when you're writing from real life, because you're constantly checking your facts and going back to the timeline and making sure you've accurately plotted that all out. Yeah.
That's quite reasonable. Absolutely. Books take a long time to write, a long time to polish, and even longer to publish. So, yeah.
Yes. And 5 minutes to read.
Yeah, that's it. Yes. It does feel a bit unfair, but there you go. Talking about reading, I am also doing a lot of listening to audiobooks as I'm, you know, toing and froing in the car, going for walks, etc. Who would you most like to read your book as an audiobook?
Oh, I would love Margaret Atwood.
Ah, that would be brilliant. Wouldn't that be a treasure? Yeah.
Wouldn't it? Yes. My husband's Canadian, so I do like that accent. Yeah. But I also think she's always got a little bit of a smile in her voice. She's got a wicked sense of humour, I think, and that comes through.
Yeah, I think that perfectly describes you. I see photos of her and I think, oh, you've been up to mischief. I can just tell by that smile. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. Where can people find you on the web and social media?
I'm pretty easy to find. On Instagram, I'm michelle.tom, just Tom for the Tom. But I know my website is michellemtom.com. Twitter, just search for my name and you'll find me.
Pop up. Okay, so yes, I'm going to tell you that you are in fact M_Tom_writer. There you are on Twitter, because we are following you. Is that the best place to find your book?
The best place to find the book, I think, is if you want to read about read the blurb, etc., is on the harpercollins.com.au website.
Beautiful. All right. And, of course, it is also on Australian Book Lovers in the memoir biography section, with the beautiful wombat looking at its reflection in the mirror, which is one of Darren's favourite little genre mascots. He loves wombats. There you go.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much for your time, Michelle. And really, do you have any final words for readers or writers?
Just keep going, everybody. Yeah. The writers are my soulmates and fellow combatants, and the readers are why we do it. And you're all brilliant, and it's just privileged to be part of this community and this industry, really. It's a second win that I didn't think I was ever going to get. So
that's brilliant.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Thank you for giving us your time, Michelle. And everybody else, it is back to the podcast. Thank you so much to Michelle Tom for a brilliant and such a generous conversation about her book, Old and New, about 10,000 Aftershocks, and her new book, which is going to be, that's just an amazing idea of coming out and finding that woman, that young woman who's, trying to hit the legal system and trying on her own to do all of those things that she wanted to do. If you're not sure, watch Michelle's book and you'll see it coming out soon. Some of the brilliant ideas and some of the thoughts, so many things from Michelle sort of prompted me to think about making beauty out of terrible things, the creation of art as therapy for mental health, and continuing a relationship with somebody after they died. So I thought those are really interesting. But something that I would love to discuss is the natural environment as an antagonist. So where do you go when you don't have a human antagonist, or how does the environment be such a critical part of some books and almost invisible in others? So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, ultimately, it can be both protagonist, antagonist. It can be beautiful, it can be terrifying, but there's something to be said about, incorporating, I think it can simmer in the background, it can just sort of be literally background, eye candy or just a setting, but at the same time it can have an absolutely pivotal role in a book, I think. And there's so much wonder and magnificent experience to be gained out there in Mother Nature. And, a complete different tangent, I was talking with some friends after watching the new Avatar going, it's just stunningly beautiful and all the water and, everything. But, one of the things we sort of ended up talking about was that the reason why it's so beautiful, I think, to watch something like that is because it is so unreal, in the sense that, realistically, nature will kill us in a second. I think, we live in houses because nature is not made for us to be exposed to her environment, on an ongoing basis. Realistically, animals want to kill you, insects will kill you, weather will kill you. It's just, if it's like it can be too cold, it can be too hot, it can be ferocious storms, and you can struck by light, all these things. But it's such a powerful thing. That can be incorporated into story, or be can be the spine of a story too. But what was interesting for me anyway, thinking about that, chatting about the upcoming interview with Michelle and, the role that nature can play. On Reddit, while I'm sometimes getting ready for coffee in the morning, just flick through Reddit or something, and there's quite a few little sort of discussions on writing and stuff. And I remember someone putting a post saying, that they feel daunted and lacking confidence to write because they were only 17, I think they were, and they know that they haven't had the life experience yet, and so their question was, well, how do I write if I don't have the confidence? And I'm thinking, well, you may not have experience in the high stakes world of international stock market trading or all that sort of stuff, but at any age, nature has been such a huge part in your life, and one split moment in time with nature can be a story unto itself, at any age. And it can be a thing of survival, who doesn't love, or at least I love stories of survival against the odds when it comes to nature, or, the way it can challenge you to rise above the levels of yourself that you didn't realise you could reach. It can be, so deeply symbolic for tragedy, and it can also really send home the message of how fragile our lives really are. And by doing that, I think it can also make us reflect and take stock of what's really important, and really enjoy those moments of, I guess, calm and the ability to think and reflect, because it can the 10,000 aftershocks. Something big happens, but there's many things that can come after it that can be a consistent reminder of, we were talking about 74 being a chance to reflect upon the foundations we've got. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we can build solid foundations, but they can be shattered or at least, fractured nonetheless. And so those aftershocks can make us reflect upon what how important were those foundations, or is there something more important to us? But there's so much,
So much, yeah. There's a couple of things that I just want to share pretty quickly, as I know that our listeners love our podcast, but we do go on a bit sometimes, and I'm conscious of the time.
That's the strong coffee I have in the cafe.
That is a strong coffee. So there's one about non-human antagonists is something I'm thinking about in terms of writing. So there's a blog from Fantasy Faction, which is fantasy and science fiction book reviews and communities. So it's fantasy-faction.com. And there's a blog about non-human antagonists, the three types being creature, environment, and social. And I thought, that's really interesting that, we think of creatures being the non-human, the environment certainly, weather, tornado, storm, earthquakes, etc., those kind of things. But also in science fiction, of course, hostile, alien or foreign environments. So, you're on Mars or you're the other side of the cosmos, are good examples of environmental antagonists. And, they're good examples of where the setting has a personality of its own. And if you think about, the film Castaway is what they put down as an example. So really, for him, the island was just the island doing its thing, but it was really provided food and water and shelter and all those things. But that's what he had to bounce off. And I'm not being funny about Wilson, he's basketball, but the island had a personality of its own, sometimes benevolent, sometimes angry, and really humans couldn't care less about, but there you go. The social one, so this is a tricky one because it's an antagonist that's created by people, but not driven by people. So a social antagonist might be where a low-born person strives to improve his or her position and climb the strata imposed by society. So racism, castes, or social mores could stand in the person's way. It might not be a single human antagonist. It might be a culture. It might be a political structure, all those kind of things. And I think the stories that I love are where there's perhaps a little bit of everything. The creature might be a dragon, the environment might be a fantasy world, and the social structure might be a raging political turmoil. So there you go. There's the combination. That's one thing. The other thing that came up when I was looking at non-human or nature as an antagonist was a scientific article from Sage Journals, which was about natural disasters. And for me, it was really reinforcing the power of words. So the abstract for this, it's quite a long title, Mother Nature's Fury, Antagonist Metaphors for Natural Disasters Increase Forecasts of Their Severity and Encourage Evacuation. So it was post the Hurricane Katrina in the US, and they did some studies there. I won't go into all of those bits and pieces, but they were talking about how natural disasters are often described as having antagonistic qualities. So wildfires, ravage, that kind of thing. But they were worried about people's perception about whether those antagonist metaphors affect people's perception of risk. And 3 studies demonstrated that if you forecast as an antagonist frame natural hazard as being more severe, then intended to evacuate more often than a literally framed natural hazard. So basically, the metaphorical language that you use to discuss natural disasters, you need to consider it when you're developing risk communication. Because what they found was that a lot of people who didn't evacuate from Hurricane Katrina said, I didn't think it sounded that serious, despite the fact that their emergency groups had said, please evacuate, this is going to happen, that is going to happen, but the language didn't carry that urgency or that that sense of risk. So the power of words.
The power of words is definitely what's needed, but I think as much power as a word can carry, it doesn't really substitute for experience. So, as you were discussing there, some of the ramifications of, or the attempt to try and oversell something that's dangerous to try and ensure that people at least understand the risks involved. But for example, when we talk about the importance of, like for example, if you're driving from Adelaide to Perth or out to the mines or something in the middle of summer, how important it is to carry water, how important it is not to leave your car, and those are things that people think, oh, they've always got a bottle of water with them, so they've got a bottle of water in their lap, and but not realising how hot it can get. I mean, some of us do realise, but then there are some people that might travel from a different country unaware not just of the heat but also of the remoteness of some of our land, and it can get really scary and really dangerous really quick. But unless you've had sort of been out in those really remote arid areas, you just wouldn't know. Likewise, I think we see it every summer, and we're going to see it again. People, I mean, I've got the luxury and the extreme luck of living right by the beach, and I'm pretty confident in the water as far as understanding all the different changes, tides, surfs, rips, all that sort of stuff. But you see it every summer. You see people come and it might be their second time to the beach in a year, and they jump in the water now, or living in Queensland, saw it all the time. Up there it's a lot more drummed into people, swim between the flags. Yeah. What do you see? You see tourists land, they swim outside the flags, and next thing you know, they're getting rescued.
Yes.
And you can, to see people, just the sheer panic of suddenly, especially when if you're surfing or whatever, and you might have to help somebody just travel that 10 meters so that feet can touch the ground again. But that can be dangerous because people panic. The real panic can be set in, and they of course become a hindrance and a danger to the person trying to rescue them. But that's one of those moments in time where 1 minute they're enjoying such a beautiful surrounding and the beauty of Mother Nature and all that comes with it, and then a second later it's the most terrifying place and situation they've ever been in. And because even though they were warned, how can you know until you've been there? So that's such a challenge, isn't it? And I'm sure there's things for me that like I probably don't understand the risk of, I don't know, brown bears in North America, but until I come face to face with one, to me they sort of seem cute, and surely they just sniff the air a little bit and then roll around for a tummy rub, but I don't think that's the case. But people that live in that environment would be the first to try and encapsulate the dangers with words. But isn't it funny too that if we want to talk about how violent weather or nature can be, it's nature. Nature will kill you in a heartbeat. Nature is a vicious, I guess, opponent on the best of days. But then when we talk about the damage we're doing or the impact we have or the relationship that we're trying to build, we say it's Mother Nature. And I think just that the absence of Mother determines nature to be one sort of aspect of our life, and then saying Mother Nature, we think of, at least I do, I think of a different nature. So very interesting how we're talking about the power of words, and I wonder if there's a big difference between calling something nature when we're describing something and Mother Nature, even though essentially we're talking about often the same thing. But it's nature can scare you and make your heart leap with wonder, like, because the beauty's just too much to handle. And everything in between.
That's it. So thank you to Michelle Tom for such a brilliant chat, and to giving us so much to think about, and encourage people to get onto her memoir and read 10,000 Aftershocks. Follow her, and when she brings out this new book, which is just amazing, this young woman from Tassie, bring it on. Now,
and of course, if you ever... I was going to say, and if you ever stumped for something to write, step outside, step into, I prefer the term Mother Nature, step into Mother Nature, something will jump out at you and you'll have a whole novel there and just a glimpse of a tree.
Yes, absolutely, even if there's no drop bears falling on you. But if you are an Australian or Indigenous author and you'd like to list your book for free, don't forget that you can head over to australianbooklovers.com/for authors. Send us all your details, and we endeavour to try and spotlight as many as we can on the podcast. But if you're a reader and you want to receive our semi-regular newsletter full of excellent Aussie authored books and giveaways, jump onto the website again, australianbooklovers.com/booklovers, and subscribe. Find us on Twitter at Australian Books. Find us on Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. We're also on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we're going to be doing some bits and pieces around the traps and trying to do a few different things this year in between doing our full-time job. So please like us on your favourite podcasting platform, or send us an email via the website, or follow us on social media and click and like and forward to support Australian authors. Because, Darren, we have to take care for now and remember to
say our quote for 2023
Oh,
episode.
I forgot my quote. Damn it, yes. I have got my quote. Let me just get it ready.
And what inspired your quote?
So I think it was more about the 2023, the fact that it is a new year. So this is a quote from Oprah Winfrey, who needs no introduction. And her quote is, "Cheers to a new year and another chance for us to get it right."
Oh, I'm not a huge fan of Oprah, but I'm a huge fan of that quote,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And a chance to get it right.
For us to get it right.
And
so,
I think that's all we can do, is just
Yeah.
keep on trying. Yeah.
Yes. What about you?
I was inspired by, obviously, the power of nature is pretty something passionate, as you can tell by the mix between coffee and conversation and the thread that went in. But I was inspired for a quote from a Native American proverb, which reads as follows: "We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." So I thought that was pretty good.
Really nice.
And
Really
says
good.
something about the relationship we have with our future selves, and also with our mother nature.
All right, Darren, we are at the Writers' Lounge, and I'm feeling like a little bevy today. I think a nice gin and tonic would be good to discuss something writerly. How about you?
Well, but it is our very first one for the fabulous year that is going to be 2023. So,
Do we need champagne? We should have,
Well, maybe not. Actually, to be honest, I was thinking, although, New Year's resolution comes with a reduction in alcohol consumption, but saying that, I might break that rule for the Writers' Lounge. I'm thinking a Long Island iced tea, the kind that... leaves you wobbly out by about halfway down the glass. But who knows? But and what about our special guest? What is the beverage of choice there?
Yes, so welcome. Go on, Kerry.
Sorry. Hi, I'll have a gin and tonic.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, with lots of ice.
So for readers who don't recognise their lovely dulcet tones, this is Kevin Klehr, and Kevin is one of our fabulous friends of the ABL. He is a writer of fantasy, sci-fi and romance. He is half of the Oz Writes instigators on Twitter, and a fabulous part of the writing community, and has many published books and scored awards and all those kind of things. But gin and tonic coming your way, Kevin.
Yes, and how apt we're talking about drinks.
Yes. And pray tell me why. First of all, I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people down in Victoria. Where are you today, Darren? Are you at home?
Yes, still on the sun-drenched Ghana country, and soon to be Ghana saltwater. When I finish recording, I might even try and get away.
Excellent.
If the Long Island iced tea doesn't get me.
Oh, yes, you might wobble off your board. And what about you, Kevin? Where are you today?
On Gadigal land, part of the Eora Nation.
Beautiful.
As
so
usual,
we're
yes.
all over this great country. And tell us about drinks, because you've got a special event happening.
Yes. So Sydney World Pride is happening over late February and March.
Yes. So right.
Mid-February, March, and as part of Sydney World Pride, they've got like a community festival called Pride Amplified, which is huge. It's getting bigger by the day, because we have an event, me, the wonderful Rebecca Langham, another fellow author named Nigel Bartlett, and also another wonderful author named Christian Baines, who's actually an Australian, but he lives in Canada and he's flying back for this.
Very good.
as he says, he's an Australian-Canadian author raised on British comedy and powered by New Zealand wine.
That is a mixed bag.
He's welcome at the Writers' Lounge then. He better drop in.
Oh, yes, he better drop in. He writes some terrific books. If Puppet Boy by Christian Baines is a must-read. It's one of my favourite books. But before I talk more about the individual authors, yes, we're doing Authors at the Pub.
I already love it.
Yes, from 2 p.m. on Saturday the 18th of February at Universal on Oxford Street. And Universal is a pub. It used to be the midnight shift for many decades. So if you're wondering where's Universal, a lot of Sydney-siders know it as the midnight shift. It's 85 to 91 Oxford Street in Darlinghurst. And what we're doing a bit of an author reading session. We're going to give away a few books. Now, the session runs for 3 hours. There's no way we're going to be on stage for 3 hours. So, in the last half, we're going to be having a bevy with you and encouraging you to buy our books on sale, probably, and signing them for you. But we have a really lovely lineup at this stage. Just to give you more of a rundown, like I said, Christian Baines will also be launching a new book called My Cat's Guide to Dating. To online dating, actually. And I actually read, I was actually a beta reader for this book when it was called My Cat's Guide to Online Dating and Corpse Disposal. I'm a bit disappointed it hasn't got the full title anymore. But it's a really cool book because in the book, the main character's cat has hacked into the main character's Grindr account and is but sometimes some of these hookups have gone really wrong, which is where the corpse disposal part comes into it. So he'll be reading a part from that book. Nigel Bartlett is a Sydney-based author. He was UK-born, and he has a fabulous book called King of the Road, which was released through Random House quite a few years ago. And it's an interesting crime thriller because it's about a gay uncle in search of his kidnapped nephew. And his kidnapped nephew has been kidnapped by pedophiles. So he's going underground to try to find the nephew before something bad happens. Right. And of course, you mentioned Rebecca Langham before. She's part of this, Authors on the Pub. She'll be reading from her new lesbian romance novel called Nurturing Hope. And she's also going to be reading from her sci-fi first novel, Beneath the Surface.
Oh, I love that one.
Yep. I'm going to be reading from... Well, not reading. I'm going to be performing with Rebecca and Christian, and maybe I haven't worked out whether I'll also grab 2 members of the audience to help, but we'll be performing a piece from Virtual Insanity, my latest dystopian novel.
That is amazing.
And yeah, I've roped them in. They've seen the script. They fight. It's a fun scene, but I'm tossing up whether to grab some audience members because there's 5 characters in this scene, so I think it could be fun for audience participation.
I think audience participation has to be a must. But so when you say performing a scene, did you take a scene from the book and then rewrite it in like stage performance style?
Yes.
Cool.
It's actually a hybrid of 2 similar scenes where the same thing is happening. Where I'm trying to save the lives. Oh, well, sorry, my character Taylor is trying to save the lives of a woman he's been involved with and his new boyfriend because augmented reality players have been told to come in and kill one of them. And I've got to make the decision which one lives. So I come up with Taylor comes up with this idea of, well, they're augmented reality players. They're obviously virgins. they've got augmented reality suits on. So if you guys pretend to have sex with them, they're not going to kill you, and you're not really having sex with them because they just in augmented reality suits, they're thinking you're having sex with them. Of course the female's like, I do not want to do this. It's just like, it's either that or your life. So that's what we're performing. So we will need audience participation to play the roles of the augmented reality players.
Perfect.
And I'll also be reading a cut-down passage from The Midnight Man, my story about a guy who meets a man in his dreams, literally in his dreams. So, yeah.
Well, Kevin, you got me thinking of a very old movie. I think it was in the 50s. Well, should I say a movie experience, The Tingler, where they popped a few electronic devices on seats and tingled the audience for certain times of the movie. Maybe that's you've got to get to the pub early and wire up a couple of chairs so that you can incorporate a tingler effect with the VR audience members.
That could be very interesting. I can tell you it's only the male boyfriend character that kind of gets into this and realizes, yes, it's this or my life, whereas the female character's like, I'm not enjoying this. I'm not enjoying this. If that augmented reality player's metal fingers go anywhere near my breasts, I'm going to scream. It's that type of scene. So it'll be fun to present to the audience.
Very good. And I dare say a couple of gin and tonics might go well to lubricate the performances.
In so many ways. Yeah. So we're also thinking of we're thinking of giving away one book each. But what we'll have a question at the end of each author reading that relates to the author reading that they just heard. So they have to listen very intently to win that book.
And that'll be on the day. You have to be there, listening, taking note. I think that's excellent. That's going to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
So
yes,
good.
Authors at a Pub is a nice way to spend February the 18th if you're in Sydney.
Indeed.
Well, just a couple of days after Valentine's Day, but you mentioned it goes for approximately 3 hours, but obviously it's going to turn into a fantastic time. Do you have any backup plans should the festivities demand to keep going?
Now, that's a good thing. I've really got to think about this because the last time when we were with the Rainbow Literary Society and did one at the Stonewall Hotel, we went for dinner afterwards. But this is, Sydney World Pride. There's quite a few events. Actually, there's an event. I shouldn't talk about an event that's on at the same time as ours, but there's a I Love House Music dance party on at the same time, and I thought to myself, I would love to join that after our event, but I've organised this event.
So you have to go. This is
this is something I have to entertain my guests.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I mean, we may just stay in the pub and enjoy. Actually, that makes more sense. Stay in the pub, and meet new people and.
Because I'm sure there'll be other authors in the audience, and there'll be people who want to write, and with at least 4 of you there on the stage or presenting, there will be plenty of chit chat going on for sure.
Yeah, and I'm trying to work out whether to take audience questions or not.
Definitely.
There's nothing worse than throwing open to audience questions and no one's got a question.
Well, that's true, but you can ask get Warren to be in the audience and get him to throw you one, and that sometimes is enough to get other people thinking. So have some Dorothy Dixes in the background.
I have roped Warren into doing the acknowledgement of country.
Excellent.
He didn't want to do it at first because, well, this is not my country. It's like, yeah, but it's not a welcome to country.
Just acknowledgement. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he'll be practicing that at some stage.
Well, there is a lot going on. So Gay Pride is, in fact, Friday the 17th of February to Sunday the 5th of March. So there are a stack of events. And Kevin, your event is part of Pride Amplified, and it's Authors at the Pub, and it goes for 3 hours. It's on Saturday, the 18th of February at 2 o'clock at the Universal Bar, which used to be the Midnight Shift in Oxford Street in Darlinghurst.
Yep, perfect.
And because it's free, do people need to book or do they just rock up?
They just rock up. In the past, when we did stuff with the Rainbow Literary Society, they did book, but then I'd get questions from friends of mine like, do we bring the ticket with us? And I just sort of thought, well, it's free anyway. Yeah. Just rock up,
Rock up, yep. And if things are a little quiet, just stand out the front and drag people in from Oxford Street, because I'm sure that there will be a crowd in Oxford Street on Saturday anyway. So there you go.
Yep, and as I say, it's most people don't get out of bed during festival season till mid-morning, so they can go to this and then party on after to whatever they want.
Perfect way to start your day at 2 o'clock. Yeah, I like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Lovely. Kevin, thanks so much.
Oh, sorry, one quick question, Kevin. The really important one. So this is the festival's amplified. Does the amplify go to 11?
Ha 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 boom 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 boom.
I had to ask. I love the Spinal Tap.
Well said, Darren. Well said.
But no, I wish you nothing but the best for the event. I'm sure you're going to have a cracking time, and it's been an absolute privilege and honour to have you on the show. Because I suspect if we tried to rope you in February 19 in the morning for a session in the lounge, there'll be no answer on your end.
I have a feeling I'm starting to make a list of things I want to do during World Pride, and there's a lot of good free gallery events that I want to go to and that. So I have a feeling I'm going to make the most of that month.
Yeah, and why not? Because people from all over the world, it is going to be brilliant.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. I am sure we'll see you again on the Australian Book Lovers, and have a fabulous time. And good luck for Authors at the Pub.
Thank you very much for having me on again, guys.
No worries at all.
Okay.
All the best, Kevin. Thanks so much, and power on for the summer in Sydney.
Thank you so much.
Take care. So for the tagline, maybe, Veronica, talking about nature and the power it has to, make us reflect on the fragile natures of ourselves, but also dance between dance between beauty and terror. How about we have finding matters at the top of the mountain? The wind is howling. We've got frost bite all across our face. Our goggles are all funny, but we're looking down onto a spectacular sunrise that's taking our breath away, in literally and figuratively, because we can hardly breathe up there because of the height of the mountain. But it's a little bit caught between that ferocious violence and stunning beauty. Excellent. Okay, so we won't be yelling because we won't have that much of a voice, but we're going to be astonished and at the same time a little bit scared. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but we'll work it out.
Okay. Astonished but a bit scared, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. That's going to challenge my acting skills yet again, but I'm imagining the top of the mountain. Darren, isn't it fantastic? Look what we can see.
This is unbelievable.
It is, but one thing I want you to remember.
Which is?
Read. More Aussie books.
I'm so terrified, but this is so beautiful.
Let's get down the mountain and read.
Yeah, done. So our acting has probably got worse to start off the year,
but
I guess the only place it can go from here is probably worse again. But we'll find out next episode. But to everybody, thank you so much for joining us for episode 74.
Stay tuned for a book review, and we will see you for episode 75, 3/4 of the way to 100.
Absolutely, and welcome to 2023. Like you mentioned before, Veronica, the chance to try and get everything right this time, and if not, well, at least we're going to do better than last time. So take care, everybody.
Bye for now.
Hi, I'm Naomi Shippen. Stories have always been an important part of my life, but it was not until recent years that I began writing my own. Mystery, suspense and domestic noir hold a special fascination for me, and my debut novel, a thriller set in the Victorian high country of Australia, will be coming out next year. You can find out more about my writing on my website, naomishippen.com, and you can follow me on social media on Twitter at Naomi Shippen, Instagram at naomi.shippen.writes, and Facebook at nshippen. Today I would like to review How to Destroy Your Husband by Jess Kitching, author of The Girl She Was Before. Cassandra Edwards is about to marry the love of her life, fellow schoolteacher Jamie. Jamie is a kind, loving, thoughtful partner, and the two have a happy life together. Cassie is in the thick of planning their perfect picture book wedding when she gets some very bad news. When Cassie's work colleague tells her that Jamie has been spotted kissing another woman, she embarks on a plan to destroy her future husband. She is determined to find out everything she can about Jamie's affair so she can use the information against him. Her covert operation has her pretending to friends and family that nothing is amiss as she spies on Jamie and plans her revenge. Cassie's mission to uncover the truth about her fiancé takes her down a rabbit hole into a dark and dangerous world of online misogyny and narcissism. Like the crazy mirrors in a sideshow, Cassie's world and the man she thought she knew so well are reflected back in alarming and distorted shapes. But Cassie's not about to give up without a fight. In her quest for revenge, she risks her safety, her sanity, and the stability of a life she worked so hard to achieve. How to Destroy Your Husband is a story of a young woman striking back at the betrayal of the man she was about to pledge her life to. Her rage-fueled mission raises some interesting questions about the efficacy of revenge and the far-reaching consequences for all in its orbit. How to Destroy Your Husband is a fast-paced and intriguing story that I ripped through in a matter of days. Cassie grows from being a compliant and unsuspecting victim to a strong and self-assured woman. I loved seeing how the story played out and the ambiguity of the ending, which saw the chips falling in some very unexpected ways. A gripping tale of domestic suspense, How to Destroy Your Husband questions how well we really know the people that we're closest to.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.